two frontiersmen sit in a bar in the frozen Yukon discussing the existence of God with the fervor that you do after one or two drinks. One a Christian, one an atheist. The atheist says, it's not like I've not given the whole God thing a chance. In fact, a month ago, I was caught away from camp in a blizzard. It was 50 below outside, and I didn't know which way was back to camp. And so I fell on my knees in the snow, and I said, God, if there is a God, I'm going to die unless you rescue me. The Christian back in the bar looks at him and says, wow, so you certainly must believe now. You're here. To which the atheist rolls his eyes and says, no, man. All that was a bunch of dog sledders who came along out of nowhere and pointed me back to camp. To run every story through the same analysis runs the risk that we always end up with the same conclusion and that we will likely miss something. My Herculean task this morning is to attempt to direct your attention to a story that is well-trodden, that you know well, but there's something you likely have missed there. And so if you have your Bibles, turn to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We celebrated with too much food and just a lot of people that we love. And so it was a great Thanksgiving. But for me, as I imagine a lot of you, Thanksgiving is the starting gun of 6 or 8 frantic weeks of activity. And so my goal is that this message this morning, this encouragement comes at a really important time so that we don't get to Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and say, we did the Christmas season wrong. We get there and kind of realize that the people we were December 8th and 10th and 12th and 15th, that is the people we're going to be on the 24th or 25th. Because my thesis is this: how you prepare will determine what you get out. The type of person and the way your soul is when you arrive at Christmas will determine what you get out of Christmas. So you don't get to be a frantic, crazy person for the next 4 or 5 weeks and then get to the 24th and go, like the way you arrive will largely determine what you get out of the holiday. Luke chapter 10, you need to understand the one or two stories before the one we'll dig into so as to understand the context. Luke writes in around 60 AD. The date of the third gospel must precede that of Acts because, of course, he writes both. Luke is a Gentile, and he's going to include a number of stories that no one else includes. Luke seems to write his gospel devoid of knowledge that Matthew has penned a gospel, and Luke will write his gospel without knowing about Matthew's gospel, where everybody steals from Mark. And so Luke chapter 10, where we begin, Jesus is about to send out the 72. He's going to give them all power and all authority to heal and to declare the gospel, to declare the coming of the kingdom of God. They just came through some Samaritan villages where it was a perfect opportunity for Jesus to instruct the disciples that if they will follow him, they must suffer rejection and separation. Rejection from the world, many will not receive this message, and separation from the life and values and priorities they knew previously. This is going to begin this notion that the towns, the people that receive you have received my message, and those that reject you have rejected me. And that language is going to be very important about receiving and rejecting as to who understands the gospel, who's accepted the gospel, and who's rejected the gospel. And so he sends the 72 out, and chapter 10, verse 21 ends that section by saying, Lord, we praise you that some have gotten it. You revealed yourself to some, but others have not. And then Luke's going to tell 2 stories about what getting it, about what receiving it looks like. He's going to illustrate those who get it, this is what they do. Those who receive it, this is what they look like. And those who reject it, that's what they look like. The next story, the first of 2, is the story of the Good Samaritan. You know this story. A lawyer comes to Jesus and says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus responds, what does the law say? The lawyer responds, what do you call 1,000 lawyers at the bottom of a sea? A good start. Ha! My wife's not in the service, and so she'll be in the next one. Lawyers don't find those jokes funny. Good Samaritan. Lawyer says, well, who is my neighbor? And so Jesus is going to tell the story of the priest and the Levite. That a priest and a Levite walk by a man who's in need, and they both see the person in need and continue on. But the righteous person in the story is going to be the who? The Samaritan, the most hated for all the Jewish people. We don't like Samaritans. We are incredibly racist towards the Samaritans, and they're going to be the more righteous one in the story. The idea is the righteous person acts. The priest and the Levite were too busy. They were distracted. They said, I don't want to deal with that. I need to get on my way. But it was the person who acted who was more righteous. Faith seems to compel action. And then he's going to tell the story we're going to look at now, the story of Mary and Martha. Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. I'll start reading in verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. A couple weeks ago, my wife was out running some errands, and I was home with the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old. And we're all in the living room playing, and it was time for me to go check on the laundry. The laundry room is in our garage that's detached. And so I said, Pax, 4-year-old, watch your sister, 2-year-old. Okay, Dad, okay. So I go out to the garage, and I move the laundry from the washer to the dryer and all that kind of stuff. And I come back in. It's only a few minutes. And I come back into the living room, and Pax is by himself. And I said, hey, Pax, where's your sister? He said, Dad, she wanted to go to your room. Now, you may remember that Mac is not walking yet. And although we don't live in a palatial mansion, the living room in our bedroom is down a hallway through a tile kitchen with a number of transition pieces and back at the back of the house. I said, I knew in this moment this was not the entirety of the story. I said, Pax, how did your sister get to my bedroom? Well, Dad, I just grabbed her by the feet and drug her. You drug your sister to our bedroom? There are multiple transition pieces. And I'm just imagining your head bounce on the tile and on the wood. It was like, she wouldn't stop touching my toys. I'm like, we do not drag your sister by the feet. Okay, Dad, okay. She wanted to go to your room. I knew this was not the entirety of the story. There was more. I needed to ask more questions. The way this text is typically read, Mary the contemplative, chose to listen to Jesus, and she made the right choice. But Martha, that busy bee, just couldn't be stopped, couldn't be bothered. Make the choice to always be like Mary. There's more to this story. Go back to verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he, being Jesus, came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Likely this is the town of Bethany, if we assume that Mary and Martha are the same Mary and Martha that have a brother Lazarus. Martha's name literally means hostess. this happens. It's very common, especially in the Old Testament, where a name denotes something very specific and particular about a person. Martha is a hostess in the best of ways. We don't know where the disciples are in this moment. They enter Bethany, but the story is going to narrow to just Mary, Martha, and Jesus. They could be there, and Luke is simply not including them in the story, or they could be somewhere else. The disciples are not in this picture. But remember that this story comes right after the story of the Good Samaritan. The righteous was the one who acted. The unrighteous were those who did not receive the traveler. The villains in the story were those who did not receive the traveler. Mary and Martha will be those who do receive the traveler. Verse 39, she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. To sit at the Lord's feet is a very specific term. To sit listening denotes that you are a disciple of the one you were listening to. This is the same Greek construction as Paul growing up sitting at the feet of Gamaliel. That Paul would become a disciple and then eventually a teacher. This is incredibly groundbreaking because not only is Jesus in the home of what appears to be an unmarried woman, so it would suggest that they have a very close family relationship, but Jesus is allowing her to sit at his feet, to receive his teaching, to be a disciple, and likely be a teacher of that. The first century Rabbi Eliezer said, it's better to burn the Torah than to teach it to a woman. And Jesus encourages, Jesus affirms that Mary sits at his feet and receives this teaching, not only to be encouraged, but that she would be identified as a disciple and likely one day a teacher. The word listening is a Greek word ode. It means listening to something that changes everything. It's used 10 times in the New Testament, primarily in John's Revelation. But the most helpful use, I find, is that it's regularly used in Greek classical drama when a new character is inputted into a story or into a play. This character that we just met in this play is going to change the entire trajectory of the story. This character that we just met in this play or drama is going to change everything. This is the rapt attention with which Mary is listening to Jesus. She sits at his feet, listening with rapt attention. One note that you would miss in verse 39, she had a sister called Mary who, after who is an untranslated kai. It means and also in the Greek. Luke wants us to know that Mary and Martha are disciples. There's no question to Luke. In fact, Mary will refer to Jesus as Lord also a number of times. No, Luke is shaping the story in a way that he communicates Jesus' point, but do not be mistaken, Mary and Martha are believers. Mary and Martha are bought in. Verse 40. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him, Jesus, and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister's left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Tell her to help me. It's interesting that Martha begins with a family squabble, including Jesus. We wouldn't do this, right? Our parents taught us all better than this. You would say, oh, I'm so sorry, Jesus, excuse me. Hey, I need you to go clean the bathroom. There's no toilet paper. The almonds are burning right now, and no one has coffee. Who has drinks? Jesus doesn't even have a drink right now, right? You wouldn't say, oh, look at my sister. She's doing nothing. There's this kind of passive-aggressive thing about it. Jesus, tell her to help me. She's not doing anything. It's interesting that Martha seems more interested in getting Jesus on board with her plans rather than listening to what he would like to happen. Martha is more interested in getting Jesus on board with well, this is what should happen. Everybody gets drinks. We have the cheese plate, charcuterie. This is how this works. This is the way it should happen. she involves him in this family squabble. It says that she is distracted, literally pulled away. She's being pulled away from what? What should be the priority? The guest. She's being pulled away from the thing that's most important, the guest. With all of her diakonean, service and ministry, the word from which we get deacon and deaconess. Note that she's not doing bad things. It's not like your husband going out and deciding to paint the garage right before you have guests come over. Like, now, this is the moment you choose? She's doing the right stuff. She's a hostess. Oh, he's got to have drinks. We got to have some food, and I want to make sure he's comfortable and need a bowl out to wash his feet. And I want to make sure. But Martha is being pulled away with all of this ministry, all of this service. When I must have been 5 or 6 years old, my dad changed jobs, and so we moved from just outside Oklahoma City. We moved to Mesquite, Texas, which is just not too far from Corsicana, if you know that area. And because of when one job ended and one job began, we had to move the week of Thanksgiving. And so my parents hadn't identified the neighborhood we wanted to live in, hadn't bought a house. So we moved from the house in Oklahoma City to an apartment in just outside Dallas. And Thanksgiving Day. So we moved on Wednesday. We wake up Thanksgiving morning. We're living in an apartment, just living in boxes. And so we started moving some stuff. And that day we had Thanksgiving dinner at Luby's Cafeteria. You likely, unless you've lived in the South, don't know Luby's Cafeteria. The best way to think about it is like Golden Corral or like a Wyatt's Cafeteria. You get like a tray and you pick like, oh, I'll have the Luann platter, and that means you get one meat. And so you pick your meat out and then you move the tray down and be like, oh, I get 3 sides. And then of course you'd always pick like a piece of pumpkin pie or something wrapped in cellophane. And my dad ate bottomless livers and gizzards that day. I don't know what a gizzard is. I just thank God that God has provided for our family in such a way that we don't have to eat gizzards. And so my dad ate bottomless livers and gizzards, and I just remember sitting in the Wyatt's Cafeteria looking around, and no one was there. Like everybody else had friends or family, somebody else to do Thanksgiving with, but we didn't. We had just moved there 18 hours before, and that was our Thanksgiving. And we would have countless Thanksgivings in the house that my parents would buy a couple months later. I don't remember most of them. I remember the Wyatt's Cafeteria Thanksgiving. It just stuck out. It was uncommon. Martha was doing what seemed common, but Jesus had a different agenda, a different plan. I wonder if many of us are beginning the holiday season, we just have to do what we always do. This is the year to beat your moms. This is the year we have to go to Aunt Susie's. Well, we always go to your parents on Christmas Day, and we always go to my parents on Thanksgiving, and it seems to be the uncommon things that stick out, that make the holidays meaningful and memorable. Have you entered this season? Did the gun go off and you're just already going, well, of course, like I've got to get presents for her, presents for him. We're going to go there. We're going to do this. When we put the Christmas lights up, and you're assuming that what God wants to do is exactly what God's always done? Maybe the plan is to do something more meaningful, more memorable, more significant. Martha just wanted Jesus on board with her plans. Lord, don't you care? My sister's left me to do all the ministry, all the service, all the work. Tell her to help me. Verse 41. Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Jesus uses Martha twice to denote affection. Oh, my friend, Martha, Martha. You are upset about many things. Antiquity typically translates that verse as, you're upset about many dishes. You're upset about many dishes. We know that feeling, right? Well, we got to have pumpkin pie for her, and we got to have salad for him, and like she's going to get mad if we don't do that weird green Jell-O salad, and we got to have ham, and we got to have turkey, and are the rolls burning? Who's checking the rolls? You're worried and upset about many dishes, but few things are needed. Mary is chosen, and this will be one of the only times you'll ever hear this come out of my mouth. The King James Version has preserved the better translation. Mary has chosen the good part, and it will not be taken from her. Mary has chosen the good part, and it's not going to be taken from her. Martha, it's not that what you're doing is wrong. It's that there was something better, and Mary chose it. There was the steak offered, and you, Martha, you took off or cut off the gristle, but Mary took the fillet. There was something better. Mary chose it, and it won't be taken from her. Jesus is not rebuking activity. He's saying there was a better choice to be made. It is difficult to teach this because we like clear parameters. We should be like Mary, contemplative and just listening and soaking in the moment. Or we should be like the Good Samaritan, always acting. Faith compels us. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus is going to heal Peter's mother-in-law, which there's ethics right there, right? Like the mother-in-law. But heals the mother-in-law, and she what? She doesn't sit at his feet and receive his teaching. She immediately gets up and begins to serve. And so the categories get muddied a little bit because it's not about always sitting and being contemplative. It's not always about being active. But somewhere in there, there's a better part. Jesus says, Martha, Mary's chosen the better part of the meal, the better dish, the better steak, and it won't be taken from her. Only one thing is needed. Most of you, because you're more spiritual than I am, won't understand what I'm about to talk to you about. But have you ever heard the term rage cleaning? Rage cleaning is when people are coming over to your house and you only have a few hours left until they're going to arrive. And so you're feverishly running around Swiffering everything and wiping every horizontal surface and trying to find a Spotify playlist that makes your house sound somewhere in between like a spa and like a Buddhist monastery or something. And you're lighting candles and you're taking extra Swiffer pads and wiping down behind the toilet as though somebody's going to walk in your door and run immediately to the guest bathroom and look behind the toilet and be like, ha-ha! Found it. And then that 5 minutes before they show up, you run into your bedroom and you put on deodorant again, and then you put on a fresh shirt and answer the door, and just you're almost like that Hallmark special, right? Like you open the door and you're like, oh, is it that time already? Please, come in. So glad you're here. Yes, we always live like this. Yes, this is always how nice our house is. Call it rage cleaning. And I will do everything in my power to not be at the house when this is going on. Martha seems distracted. She seems to be in an uproar. It says you are worried about many things. Worried literally means entanglements. You're bound by all these things. You're upset. It means there's an inner uproar within you. There's this inner uproar within you. Attention to the moment, the present, is not essential because the Son of God is present in the living room. The idea of presence is the expectation that God has ordained this meeting. God, the omnipotent and omnipresent God, has ordained that these people sit at my table and in my living room, has ordained this meeting. And I believe, as Bonhoeffer said, that God will be discovered in the space between us. And so my attention is here to the guest because I believe God's going to reveal himself and God's going to speak and God's going to encourage. And at the end of the day, the toilet being totally clean is not nearly as important as attention to God's work in the lives of the people we encounter this holiday season. '18th century monk Jean-Pierre de Caussade writes, "Saints discover that perfection comes not through reason or enlightenment or reflection, but through every affliction and moment of service sent by God. Through their duty to the present moment. Through their duty to the present moment. It is in this moment that God is veiled, obscured, and reveals himself. Paula D'Arcy writes, God comes to us disguised as our life. God comes to us disguised as our life. To make room for Christ this season, we must slow down, be present in the moment. Jesus isn't judging Martha's busyness. He's judging her worry, her distraction, her anxiety. I want to offer you two observations from this text that I'm praying and thinking about. The first is this: Martha was everything good and right, but she was not present. Martha was everything good and right, but she was not present. A holiday of meaning and of memories means being present to myself, those around me, and God's work in us both. Being present to myself, those around me, and God's work in us both. I don't want to get everything done for the holidays at the cost of attention to my soul. I don't want to have everybody's presents wrapped under the tree and the lights on the house and get there and realize that my soul is threadbare or my soul is thin like a tire without grooves. I want to be present to myself, asking questions of God, what do you want to do in me and through me this holiday season? Another way Brian specifically is thinking about this is I want to be present to my body. Am I just sitting all day and not drinking enough water? Am I eating junk food all the time? Like, am I getting my steps in? I want to be present so that I don't get to January 4th and I'm like, thanks for the pants, honey. I need a bigger size. Like, I'm trying to be present to my body to make sure I'm not overeating, that I'm not eating my feelings because my mother-in-law is here, whatever that is. Be present to myself, my soul, my heart, paying attention there to my body, to those around me. Not just those that will come over on Thanksgiving or those that will come over on Christmas, but also those that are there all the time. Being present to my kids, not just zoning out on my phone or something like, yeah, go turn on another cartoon, but trying to be present to my kids, be present to my wife. Like, let's make sure we're having considerable and good conversations. And then finally, present to God's work in our lives. One of the things I'm praying regularly now when people come over is, God, would you just give me some kind of word of encouragement? I just want them to leave a little bit lighter. I just want them to leave a little bit more encouraged. Would you encourage me? Would you encourage us through something that they say? I want to be present. I want to be aware of the work in God's work in my life this holiday season, those around me, and God's work in us both. Tom Rapsis writes this: it's hard to be present if, like Mary, you were distracted. We always seem to get caught up in our own busyness, meeting deadlines, running errands, fulfilling desires, defending opinions. Hello. Reacting to other people. We seem to believe that something important needs to be done, found, or accomplished, and it keeps us from living in the present moment. Regret is living in the past. Anxiety is living in the future. Both are not living in the present. Regret is living in the past. Oh, I wish I had or I should have. Anxiety is living in a future moment you've not been given yet. Did we get enough presents for him? How much did they spend? When are we leaving for? How many dishes do we need? We need more pumpkin pie. It keeps us from living in the present moment. Some of the greatest culprits or causes of this holiday misplaced anxiety is going to be unreasonable expectations and measuring efforts. Unreasonable expectation and measuring efforts. Mom's turkey was always perfect, and so mine has to be. Our table was always so beautiful. It had the flowers and everybody's table setting, and so we've got to do that. My dad always had the house looking like Clark Griswold's house the Friday after Thanksgiving, and so we've got to pull that off. Well, you heard that, the Johnsons are getting their kids at X, Y, and Z, and our kids in their class, so we can't get them less than that. Unmet, unreasonable expectation. Our house was always, so ours has to be. I saw what Joanna Gaines posted, and why does our table look so shabby? Measuring. Well, they spent $400 on our kids, so we've got to spend $400 on theirs. Did we do enough? These are unreasonable expectations, unreasonable measuring that will leave you anxious and constantly living in a moment that's not yours yet, robbing you of the present. And the second, this holiday season, action and contemplation are not mutually exclusive. Action and contemplation are not mutually exclusive, but neither has value alone. Neither has value alone. The point of the Good Samaritan story is that faith acts, faith receives, faith hosts. And the point of the Mary and Martha story is don't let it distract you from the work God wants to do in you and use you in. The people you are hosting that will be in your home, they're God's homework for you this season. They're God's homework for you because God reveals himself as our life. Frank Craddock writes, if we censor Martha too harshly, she may abandon serving altogether. And if we commend Mary too profusely, she may sit there forever. There's a time to go and do. There's a time to listen and reflect. Knowing which and when is a matter of spiritual discernment. If we're to ask Jesus which example applies to us, the Samaritan or Mary, his answer would probably be yes. I went to college and on a golf scholarship. I played college golf. I worked really, really hard for 6 years to do that. And my father paid for private golf lessons for a number of years at a country club that we couldn't afford to go to, but we were able to swing. That's a Jay Licata right there. We were able to swing private lessons a couple times a month. My coach used to give me what he called swing thoughts, which were these mantras or refrains that you would repeat in your head during the entire golf round. So it'd be something like, check your alignment, or it'd be something like, break your wrist early, or fire your hips. And you'd repeat this through the entire round. It was a mantra, it was a refrain, it was a chorus that you would have. I want to offer you a couple swing thoughts for the holiday season. Something that maybe a refrain, maybe a chorus, maybe a liturgy that you continue to pray and pour over, depending on where you find yourself. And so I'm going to offer some categories as we land the plane here, but I would encourage you to write this down or take a picture that you could access it quickly and easily. For those of you with in-laws that will be there that you don't like, for those of you who someone will bring a boyfriend or girlfriend to your house that you don't like. For those unspoken words and unresolved tensions. For those with an uncured illness and unresolved questions. For those with an empty chair at the table this year due to death, divorce, estrangement, or conflict. Maybe your prayer is, Lord, help me to trust that you already know. And let your nearness be my peace. Lord, help me to trust that you already know, and let your nearness be my peace. A couple weeks ago, Mac had another medical event, and Meg was at a business or a conference in Minnesota. I went to the emergency room with the ambulance, and then finally came home and put her down, and the aunt came over to watch, and I just walked around my neighborhood, and this was my prayer. Lord, you already know. Let your nearness be my comfort. I don't need to inform you what just happened. Let your nearness be my comfort. Lord, I don't need to inform you that I come this Christmas just after this divorce, just after this diagnosis, just after this job loss. You know that. Let your nearness be my comfort. For those of you who will have ungrateful guests or family, for those of you that will have unrealistic self-imposed expectations or those imposed by others, with those who have shoes too big to fill, no one could. Those who'd be honest enough to say, I'm still struggling with bitterness or hurt. Maybe your prayer is, Lord, help me to see what I do for this family as a joy and not a burden. Help me to see what I do for this family as a joy and not a burden. And finally, for those who are going to struggle to be present, for those who want to get the perfect picture Instagram story, for those who are measuring what they did or what somebody else did for them, for those with anxiety, depression, or some kind of mental illness this holiday. Lord, may I offer the gift of my undivided attention to those around me and release the need to impress anybody. Help me to release the need to impress anybody. 2 weeks ago was my birthday. Meg sent me to New Jersey to visit my best friend. He is an executive pastor in New Jersey. I'd never been to New Jersey, and now that I have, I think they should require a visa and a passport to attend, to visit northern New Jersey. We woke up the first morning, and he said, let me take you to my bagel shop. And I said, okay, let's go to your bagel shop. I've been to Einstein's Bagel. I can do this. I didn't realize in walking in, everybody looks like an extra from Good Will Hunting. Everybody has on flannel, is a good 20 pounds overweight, massive beard. And the bagel shop's really small and narrow, and you walk in, and other things I learned, a value meal there was a bagel, coffee, and a box of Newports. And so the first day we go there, and I'm looking at all my options, and I'm like, can I get a, and he's really brusque. He's like, hey man, when you know, let me know. And then goes to the next people, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And so the next day he's like, let's grab a bagel before we get on the train to go to New York. I'm like, okay. So we get outside, I'm like, hold on. I want a whole wheat bagel, egg, sausage, cheese, hold the Newports, just a black cup of coffee. And I'm going to sit on this bench over here that Lord is my witness said, forever in our hearts, Angelo. And I sat on Angelo's bench, and my friend went in and ordered my bagel and came back out. And we sat there and watched the leaves and drank our coffee and saw more people smoking than I've seen in the last 20 years. It was a far better experience because of how I prepared. I don't want you to get to the 24th and realize you did it wrong. Get to the 25th and wake up and say, well, we made it through, but it was a slog. How you prepare will determine what you get out of it. You will not arrive at the 24th a different person. You'll be the person you were on the 15th. So let's start being thoughtful. Let's start being really considerate about the kind of day, the days we want to have with the people God puts in our path. Will you pray with me? Father, I pray that we would all remember that, Lord, your work is with the people you put in front of us. Our children and our spouses and our in-laws and our outlaws and the cousins and our neighbors. This is the work. This is the way you're going to reveal yourself to us. This is the way you're going to speak. So God, may we not miss that work, because although we're doing good ministry-minded, service-oriented things, the better part was to sit and be with these people and listen for how you're moving and working. May we ask questions this holiday season of, hey, I know this is the first Christmas after your divorce. This is the first Christmas after the job loss, after the diagnosis. Let's talk about how are you doing? I pray that we would be the kind of people who would choose the better part and get on the other side of Christmas and be different people, be changed because of it. I pray all these things, wanting more of you in January than we had in November and December. Amen. Our prayer team's going to come in just a second on both sides. I talked to a couple people this morning who already said, man, my father-in-law came to Thanksgiving. My mother came to Christmas, and woo. If that is something that you had Thanksgiving, or something that you are already worried about for Christmas, I would love for you to come and just let our people pray for you. Just pray for you that you would be kind and generous when not given that. That you would see the work you do for your family when you're spending more money than you thought you were going to as, let it be a joy, not a burden. So if you'd like to be prayed for, they'll be up here. But I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask that you stand. And Josh is going to lead us now.